verify the identity. You'll need your driver's license and your social security card for identification. And they'll ask, did you review the schedules, the petition, the questionnaire, the statement of intention? There's a lot of stuff in here. And by that time, they would have reviewed it, because we don't file it unless they review it and unless they approve it. And then they ask, are there any changes that you would like to make? If there have been no changes, you know, the debtor usually says no, and we go forward. And it's that simple. It's really not a complicated process. It may seem complicated. There is a lot of specialized terminology and knowledge, but the attorney's office will walk the debtors right through. And I refer to debtor because it's a technical term, but you know, maybe for this interview I should refer to them as individuals. But in the
guy who owns a lot of money.
In the bankruptcy community, we refer to those individuals as debtors. Now, during the break, you asked me about cram down.
Yeah, what is a cram down? And I heard that sounded scary, like they're going to cram the debt down my throat. I mean, what does cram down mean?
It's actually in reverse, and one of my law school professors actually, that's how he explained it to me when I took bankruptcy in law school. You know, he said, cram down. It's actually the debtors cramming down the creditor's throat the value of the vehicle. And the prime example is a vehicle.
Okay.
It used to be better, by the way, before 2005, but it's still good. Prior to 2005, someone could go to the dealership, buy a brand new car, drive it off the lot. Well, guess what happens when you drive a new vehicle right off the lot? It depreciates, doesn't it?
Oh boy, yes, you know, it does.
So next week, they could file bankruptcy and make a claim to pay the value of the vehicle based solely on what it's worth. What is the fair market value at the time you file bankruptcy?
So even if you bought an Escalade for like $45,000, the minute you drive it off, it starts depreciating. It turns into, the minute you hit the speed bump, boom, boom, it's just $42,000. And then, you know, after a year and about $30,000 on it's worth $34,000.
In the old days, you could immediately cram it down. Now, the individual has to have owned the vehicle for at least 910 days or 2.5 years. I guess it's easier to look at it 2.5 years. If you've owned a vehicle for 2.5 years, and let's just say, I'll make this example simple, it's only worth $10,000, but you still owe $25,000. Well, if you've had a change in your finances where you can't afford to pay the $25,000 and you've owned it for 2.5 years or longer, you could propose a plan that only purports to pay the value, $10,000. The difference in that note is treated as an unsecured note. If there's not enough money to go around to pay that, well, I mean, that's just the way it is.
You know, and I don't do a lot of bankruptcy, but I do consumer law. And like, I get a lot of calls from the elderly who say, these credit card people just are hounding me day and night. I'm about to have a heart attack or stroke. I've even had them threaten jail in some instances, which is totally against the law, saying you could get in a lot of trouble, and try to hint at jail but never say it because they know that's against the law. But when I say that these people are at the end of their rope, and I tell the creditors, and this is true, they've mentioned bankruptcy, wow, the tone of that whole conversation changes. I mean, the creditors like, oh, well, we can work something out, and sometimes they'll settle for 50 cents on the dollar, because they know, in reality, when you do that credit, unsecured debt and the list and everything, say somebody owes like $15,000 in credit, how much can they, well, it's sort of a cram down too, right, on them, because, you know, if, like, I'm just using an example, Discover Card or something, and I have Discover Card, they're great people, but I'm just saying, Discover Card or maybe MasterCard or Visa, if they're saying, you owe us 20 grand here, you owe us 10,000 here, and you owe us 12,000 here. So, you know, we've got 42 grand in unsecured debt, and when you do that, okay, you have them listed. How do you advise the client, and what sort of restructuring plan? Let's use Chapter 13. How are they going to reduce these? You know, 20, 10, 12. You know?
Well, it's actually very simple. It's based on the disposable income. The secured get paid first. If there's not, let's just assume there's zero money left to pay those unsecureds, because sometimes that's the situation, especially when we have a small business failure where it was a sole proprietorship. And I've had cases like that where we have honest debtors that make it a go at a small business, they run it for a couple of years, their business isn't working, so they're living off credit. After so many years, they might owe $100,000 or more, which I've had cases like that. And it's wiped away. When the disposable income, when there's just not enough to pay that unsecured, there's just not enough to pay. They're behind the line. They're the last ones on the list. And in the end, when you complete your Chapter 13, whatever outstanding balance remained, like I said, it's wiped away. You get your Chapter 13 discharge and you get your fresh start. And by the way, Joe, a lot of people don't know this. In fact, I wasn't too sure about it recently, but in many instances, a Chapter 13 might improve someone's credit score, which is counterintuitive. I know that's not what most people think. They think, oh, bankruptcy is going to be on my credit report. Well, that's true. It might make it more difficult for you to obtain future loans, but a lot of people facing bankruptcy already have just terrible FICO scores. We're talking about in the 400s. And in the bankruptcy, if it's a successful bankruptcy, a Chapter 13, and they're making payments, guess what? They have history of making regular payments. At the end, their FICO score may have improved 150 points because they successfully paid the debts that they could afford, and it was reported to the credit bureaus of these monthly payments.
Well, and you brought up the point that I was going to bring up. We got 2 minutes left, but Mr. Gonzalez brought up the point that how is this going to affect your credit? And it can affect it adversely. My understanding is it can stay up to 10 years, but a lot of the time, as you said, by restructuring, by perhaps paying off debt, by getting on a structured plan, you can even improve your credit with bankruptcy, which is an irony. You have to get bankruptcy, you have to declare bankruptcy in order to improve your credit sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's the case sometimes. In fact, I've had personal friends who filed Chapter 7, and 3 years later, they were very responsible with their credit. They were able to obtain a mortgage at a very good rate. Of course, this was probably about a year and a half ago before the foreclosure crisis. So I think today would be a little bit more difficult because there are greater hoops and hurdles and greater requirements on the banks, but it's not impossible. It's very possible, especially today where the bankruptcy laws require individuals to take a personal financial management course after they have filed bankruptcy, before they get their discharge.
Well, we've got a few seconds left. I just want to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors. The Matthews Law Firm in Houston, Texas. That's www.thematthewslawfirm.com. David Matthews and Jason Webster and all the attorneys out there doing a great job. You can reach them at www.thematthewslawfirm.com, and their number is going to be appearing here on the screen. Let's not forget Rhodes Vela, good friends of mine, Tom Rhodes and Phil Vela. That is the rhodesvela.com. That's rhodesvela.com, or you can reach F. Vela at rhodesvela.com and contact Phil Vela or Tom Rhodes. Also, Impact Credit Group USA, very appropriate. Tommy Holbein helping a lot of people get themselves back on the road before bankruptcy, and that's impactcreditgroupusa.com. And not to mention Vasquez Flores Home Health, 361-881-9922, caring for the elderly. Mr. Gonzalez, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for coming by.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
I hope that you come by. Now, we talked about bankruptcy. We've talked about the basics. I hope people contact you if they have any specific questions. 361-887-6363. Remember, this does not constitute legal advice. Get the attorney of your choice or contact mytexasbar.com, www.mytexasbar.com, or look up information for the Texas State Bar to ask for the attorney of your choice, because people, you need to know your rights, especially in this climate. We want to thank all the TV stations that carry us, including Corpus Christi KTMV, Channel 6, Time Warner, Channel 21 in San Antonio, soon to be Channel 23. And let's not forget my good friend Gabe Gonzalez, the manager out there at KVTV, Channel 13, CBS in Laredo, reaching out 80 miles into Mexico too. We're going international. And don't forget www.youtube.com, search term South Texas Crossfire. Thanks to our producers, Real Simple Productions, Jordan, Dan, and Dave. And I tell you, the credit should be rolling up right now. We got to go. We're out of time. But next time, and if you have any questions, call me, 361-887-8670, or Joe at Flores Law Firm. Thank you, and God bless.